All right. So, this is a scary one. Religion. Yeah. I did use an epitaph towards religion. I apologize in my previous, I think, are lectures. I've learned some things in life. I think I have the right to lecture at my age. So, okay, religion. Now, when we look at the Sermon on the Mount, they're called the Beatitudes. You know, not exactly sure why they're called that. The way to be, the Beatitudes, or is it the Holy C, the BEE, you know. There is some interesting higher reasonings concerning those words, you know, deify, bee, queen bee, used by women, or femme. I prefer femme. They did not come from men, that's for sure. That's the worst possible thing I could possibly think of. They have their own planet, in fact. I know that for a fact. I mean, that has to be true. Or just hallucinating, really. And that's not true. So, okay. Anyhow, I digress. Okay, the Sermon on the Mount, we see are constant calls for piety. People say, well, piety is an acceptable virtue of life. Piety allows us to become distinguished and judge other people. Well, really? That is not true. Okay. Piety, in fact, is the knowing of something without having the facts. So, it's a conundrum. It's a vicious cycle that causes a person to completely divorce themselves of reality eventually if they become pious enough. They will divorce themselves of reality. So we see that, you know, this is rather blunt, but the words of Jesus or whoever that was back then were superficial. They never really went into processes the fuller explanations of life, and really explicatives and exeters, and he wasn't very pliny exeters. You know, philosophers went there way before Jesus was ever born, and engaged in intellectualism and really tried to get a life. But why was the message so popular? Well, because you're throwing down reason, really. You're taking the logic and reasoning of life. You're taking the materialism, you know, the proof by usages and logic, and you're discarding that in favor of what is called Sharia, the law of it's really penitence and the demagoguery of the mob mentalities. Okay, so these mentalities were seized upon by quite a few people, unfortunately. Just because they're popular doesn't mean they're good. So, I will admit that is extremely judgmental. But what else is there to say? What other argument is there to make? You know, a closed system that no longer allows questions to be asked. People have questions that are never answered. Pious people condescend, demand penance, you know, and this cycle goes on and on, you know. So we see that there are so many vicious cycles when it comes to the demagoguery and penitence. Really, it's a contraption. Okay, so it's a contraption that keeps people locked in to a certain way of thinking. And it was seized on by an emperor. He understood its mass appeal. Many years of bloodshed. And then people would say, well, we finally came to this idea that we had to modify our thinking. Oh, did we modify our biblical thinking? Well, somewhat. The answer is we came up with a government that said, no, you actually may not do that. Religion and state are no longer one and the same. And we divided religion and state. People who are very religious, even so, stood up and said, you know, you cannot exert that much control over me. I'm a sovereign individual, and I will not allow you to do that. In fact, they wrote a constitution that says you cannot do that. And at that time, many countries were moving towards that, and moving away from monarchies to democracies. So the idea is people stood up and said no. And that's the limit that religion has now. We've seen examples of what happens when, you know, the government goes to pot and there's high religious fervor in the theater. Sometimes ethnic cleansing and all sorts of barbarous things happen. And that's just not the Bible. That's just all religion. There's some exceptions. Buddhism seems to be a bit immune to some of these things. Then I've read some things about Buddhists doing some very terrible things. There is an atheist idea in Buddhism also, and Hinduism. And those aren't exactly the most popular thoughts. But, it's just interesting. So thousands of years we come up with that people have been fighting. What they've been fighting is this idea of humanity. The conflation of the individual with the tribe. There's a pessimist that said, if you go against the tribe, you're going to be a very lonely man. And that's really what you make of life, really. Because you just have to find another way to have your opinions and not back down. And, a fly? Oh, that's disgusting. Almost went in my mouth. Oh. Okay, sorry for being weird. Yeah, so the idea here is conflating the individual with collectivism. Well, collectivism is conflating the individual with humanity. E pluribus unum. Out of one, many. Right, it's not many that it's supposed to control. We're supposed to have individuated liberties. Individuated liberties. If it's how we all go about on the road, that's self-rule, you know. That is, we're ruling over ourselves. We're making sure we're not crashing into other people. There's no one that can stop us from crashing into other people. They can put us in prison for doing so. But the cops are not going to stand or sit behind everybody in a cop car and make sure, using, I don't know, what, a tractor wave from Star Trek to make sure that people don't crash into each other. Have computers that force people to obey their lane. I'll go over like a lead balloon, won't it? So we see that it's the same idea. What we have as religion is running against nature. It's running against the individual over and over and over again. And then with this idea of spirituality that embraces humanity, and then now the individual has to run up against humanity, and that's terrible. That should never be. The mob should never dictate my individual liberties or anybody else's. This is where we come up with atheism and liberty. The idea is that I'm rejecting all masters, which would include a God, and then we have out of that maximizing my liberty, where then I could say that I have rejected the government as my master. I'm not renting my mind out to the government for anything, Right, so Snowflake's kind of like a religious person. They are a moralist that wish to dictate a nanny state upon people. They look at people as children, and that need to be curtailed and hedged at all times. Sometimes, some of them do, and then others just say, well, only for these things. But then we know how that works in government. When the government decides to be everybody's nanny, they end up owning everything, as happened in England, And as I pointed out, it was a big freaking mess. They just failed and ruined their economy. And then they say Margaret Thatcher, a capitalist, brought them back. I heard a lot of bad things about Margaret Thatcher, but maybe that's just the red media going off again. Maybe I was fooled by the red media at some point in time when I was younger, and maybe she had her foibles. But if she brought back Britain from economic disaster to capitalism, well, that's the legacy right there. I mean, I don't care if she kills somebody in cold blood. You save an entire nation. There you go. Not that I don't care, but you get the point. The point is, you can't take away a legacy of a person based on an issue that has nothing to do with the import, with the category of the impact that they had on life, Yeah, it's kind of late. But 14 minutes, 17 seconds. So, this all works into the sphere of liberty. Really liberating your mind. Do you wish to liberate your mind, or are you going to sit back and allow people to dictate life to you? I really don't mean to condemn people, because that sounds like I'm really condemning a whole lot of people. But are a whole lot of people active in their government? Do they send letters to their senators? Do you even get forms of letters that people have drawn up And all you have to do is sign your name to it. And say, oh, I agree with that. Sign your name, because that's an awesome letter. Not really. They don't read philosophy. They don't read poetry. A lot of people sitting around watching the boob tube. And that's terrible. But there are extraordinary people out there. And I'd like to hear about them, kind of just, it makes me reset a bit, and run through my emotions, you know, because it always makes me, as a man, as a human being, wonder if I'm being a jackass, But then I come back to the conclusions, no. The proof is in the pudding. Not pudding. Pudding. Where did you put that? Did you put that all in the right places? So, as a libertine, I find it necessary to push this idea that, caring is action. Caring equals action. So, if you're in a paradigm of religion that is steering you off your emotion, off your base of logic, and you find yourself not caring, maybe you should think about that. Maybe you should think, am I a person of action, in all the personal matters that are pertinent to myself, or is it just about, having a flashy lifestyle and saying, oh, look, see, I am a successful person. Well, financially, success is not the same thing, in my view, as a personal success. There's a lot of rich people that are in the same boat as everybody else, wondering about life. See, I was about to make a jackass comment, and I stopped myself. So we gotta think about that as excuse me, as a civilization. It's not that we do care for each other as we should care for ourselves, like the golden rule. Well, no, it's really a cycle. Can we form great cycles of caring for each other? Are we actually sharpening each other like a sword? Sharpening like two shads of iron? That's a good idea right there. That's from the Bible. There's some interesting things in the Bible. Some places where I see where they're going, and then other places like, well, no. That's about it. Just trying to leave people with a question about the true intent, the modus operandi and the intent of their humanity, of themselves, their consciousness, you, self. Where is that going? Thank you.